The stagecoach rattled into Camp Verde, Arizona territory on a scorching afternoon in late August of 1882, carrying a woman whose condition would set tongues wagging before sunset and challenge one lonely cowboy's understanding of honor, duty, and unexpected love. Olivia Morrison stepped down from the coach with considerable difficulty, one hand pressed against her lower back, the other cradling the swell of her belly that pushed against the faded blue fabric of her traveling dress. The driver, a grizzled man named Pete who had seen plenty of strange sights in his 30 years on the frontier, offered his hand with unusual gentleness. He had learned her story during their 3-day journey from Prescott, and despite his rough exterior, he felt protective of the young woman who carried such obvious shame alongside her unborn child. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty Main Street. Olivia stood beside her single worn trunk, squinting against the brightness, searching for the man she had traveled nearly 2,000 miles to meet. Thomas Xavier had written to her 6 months ago, responding to her advertisement in the matrimonial section of a Boston newspaper. His letters had been simple but kind, describing his small ranch outside Camp Verde where he raised cattle and horses. He had written about the red rocks that glowed like fire at sunset, the creek that ran cold and clear year-round, and his hope that a good woman might consider building a life with him in this wild, beautiful country. She had not told him about her condition. How could she? The truth was complicated and painful, and she had convinced herself that perhaps it would not matter, that perhaps he would understand. Now, standing in the blazing heat with her swollen ankles and aching back, she realized how foolish that hope had been. A tall figure emerged from the shade of the general store's porch. Thomas Xavier was 32 years old, lean and weathered from years of hard work under the Arizona sun. His dark hair needed cutting, and dust covered his boots and the lower half of his denim pants. He had shaved that morning, scraping away a week's worth of stubble in preparation for meeting his bride, and his jaw still felt strangely bare. He had been nervous all day, checking his pocket watch every few minutes, adjusting his hat, wondering what this woman from Boston would think of him and his rough life. He stopped dead when he saw her. His brown eyes traveled from her face, flushed from heat and exhaustion, down to the unmistakable evidence of her pregnancy. The moment seemed to stretch impossibly long. Olivia watched emotions flicker across his face like clouds racing across the sky. Surprise, confusion, and something that might have been disappointment or anger. The street had gone quiet. The blacksmith paused his hammering. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, stood frozen in her doorway. Even the horses at the hitching rail seemed to wait for what would happen next. Thomas walked forward slowly. His boots made soft sounds in the dirt. When he reached Olivia, he removed his hat, revealing the mark where it had pressed against his forehead. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes and the steadiness in his gaze. Miss Morrison. His voice was deep, quiet. Yes. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Mr. Xavier, I am so sorry. I should have written to you. I should have told you. He looked at her face for a long moment, and she forced herself not to look away, though shame burned in her chest. Whatever he saw there seemed to affect him, because his expression softened slightly. How far along are you? 9 months. It could be any day now. The admission cost her what remained of her pride. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. I understand if you want nothing to do with me. I have a little money saved. Perhaps I can find work somewhere, or I can take the next stage back east. Even as she said it, she knew how impossible it was. She had barely enough money for a week's lodging, certainly not enough for the return journey. And what would she return to? Her parents had died 2 years ago of influenza. Her sister had married a man who made it clear there was no room in his house for Olivia or her shame. She had left behind a city that offered women in her situation nothing but contempt and poverty. Thomas studied her carefully, noting the shadows under her eyes, the way she swayed slightly on her feet, the desperate pride that kept her chin lifted despite everything. He thought of his own mother, dead these 15 years, and what she would have said about a man who turned away a woman in such need. He thought of his father, who had taught him that a man's character was measured by how he treated those with no power to demand better. But more than that, something in her face called to him. Beneath the exhaustion and fear, he saw strength and determination. This woman had traveled halfway across a continent, pregnant and alone, seeking a better life. That took a kind of courage he respected. "What about the father?" he asked. Olivia's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "He was a man I worked for in Boston, a man who promised marriage, who swore he loved me. When I told him about the baby, he gave me $50 and told me to handle the problem. He was married, you see. I had not known." He had been very careful to hide it. The bitterness in her voice was matched by something else, something harder. Thomas recognized it because he saw it in his own mirror sometimes. It was the look of someone who had learned a painful lesson about trust and betrayal. He made his decision in that moment, though later he would not be able to say exactly why. Perhaps it was loneliness. Perhaps it was his mother's voice in his memory, urging kindness. Perhaps it was simply that Olivia Morrison, for all her troubles, had kind eyes and a stubborn set to her jaw that suggested she would not be beaten by circumstance. "That child will have my name," he said clearly, and his voice carried across the silent street. "We will be married as soon as possible. The baby will be born legitimate, and no one in this territory will have cause to say otherwise." Olivia stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "You cannot mean that. You do not know me. This child is not yours." "The child will be mine when we sign the marriage certificate," Thomas said firmly. "That is all that matters. Now you look about ready to fall over. My wagon is at the livery. Let me get your trunk and we will go see Reverend Phillips." "Right now?" Her voice rose in surprise. "No point in waiting. Folks have already seen you step off that stage. The sooner we are married, the sooner we put an end to the gossip." He lifted her trunk easily, settling it on his shoulder. "Can you walk to the church? It is only 2 streets over." Olivia nodded numbly. She felt as if she had stepped into a dream or perhaps had fainted in the heat and was hallucinating. This tall, quiet cowboy with dust on his boots was offering her salvation without even knowing her, without asking anything in return. It seemed impossible, yet he was already walking toward a small white building with a cross on top, clearly expecting her to follow. She followed. What else could she do? Reverend Phillips was a kindly man in his 60s, with white hair and gentle eyes, that had seen much of human nature in his years on the frontier. He listened to Thomas's brief explanation without interrupting, his gaze moving between the cowboy he had known for 10 years and the pregnant young woman who swayed with exhaustion. "This is what you want, Thomas?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir." "And you, Miss Morrison?" Olivia looked at the Reverend, then at Thomas Xavier, this stranger who was offering her more kindness than she had known in months. "Yes," she whispered. "Then let us proceed." The Reverend sent his wife to fetch 2 witnesses from the neighboring houses. Within half an hour, Olivia Morrison became Olivia Xavier in a brief ceremony that she would later remember only in fragments. Thomas's deep voice speaking his vows, the simple gold ring he produced from his pocket that had belonged to his mother, the way his hand felt steady and warm when he held hers. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas did not kiss her. He simply nodded once, then thanked the reverend and the witnesses. They signed the certificate, Olivia's hand shaking so badly she could barely form the letters of her new name. Thomas signed with a steady, practiced hand, and it was done. They walked to the livery in silence. The sun was starting its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Thomas loaded her trunk into the back of a wagon hitched to two sturdy horses and helped her onto the seat. His hands on her waist were gentle, respectful, and he released her the moment she was settled. The ride to his ranch took almost an hour. The road followed a creek lined with cottonwood trees, their leaves rustling in the evening breeze. Red rock formations rose on either side, catching the fading light and glowing like embers. Despite her exhaustion and confusion, Olivia found herself moved by the stark beauty of the landscape. It was nothing like the green forests and rocky coastlines of her Massachusetts childhood, but it had a grandeur that took her breath away. Thomas drove in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. He seemed like a man accustomed to quiet, at ease with it in a way that city people rarely were. Occasionally, he pointed out landmarks. The boulder shaped like a sleeping bear, the spot where the creek pooled deep enough for swimming, the distant line of mountains that marked the edge of his grazing land. The ranch house came into view as the sun touched the horizon. It was modest but well built, constructed of adobe with a covered porch that ran along the front. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and Olivia could see cattle grazing in a pasture beyond. Gardens had been planted near the house, though they looked somewhat neglected, and chickens scratched in a fenced yard. Thomas pulled the wagon to a stop and helped her down. Up close, she could see that his eyes were very brown, almost black in the fading light, and that there was a scar on his chin, small and white against his tanned skin. "It is not much," he said, a touch of uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "Just 2 rooms and a loft. But it is sturdy, and the roof does not leak." "It looks wonderful," Olivia said honestly. Compared to the tiny boarding house room she had occupied in Boston, working 16-hour days in a factory to save money for her journey west, this house looked like a palace. He carried her trunk inside and lit a lamp. The interior was neat but sparse, with handmade furniture and bare walls. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a table with 2 chairs near the window. A door led to what she assumed was the bedroom. Thomas set the lamp on the table and turned to face her, suddenly awkward. "You should take the bedroom. I will sleep out here." "That is not necessary. I cannot put you out of your own bed. You are 9 months pregnant and exhausted from traveling. You will take the bedroom." His tone brooked no argument. "There is a pump outside for water. I will bring some in for you to wash. Are you hungry? I have beans and cornbread from yesterday. It is not fancy, but it is filling." Olivia realized she was starving. She had been too nervous to eat much during the journey, and now that the immediate crisis had passed, hunger hit her with force. "That sounds perfect. Thank you." He brought in water and set about warming the food while she washed her face and hands in the basin. The simple act of cleaning away the dust of travel made her feel more human. When he set a plate in front of her, she ate ravenously, too hungry to be embarrassed by her appetite. Thomas ate more slowly, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. When they had finished, he cleared the plates and then stood by the door, hat in his hands. "I need to see to the horses and check on the cattle before dark. Will you be all right here alone for a bit?" "Of course." He nodded and left, and Olivia found herself alone in her new home, married to a man she had met only hours ago. The strangeness of it all washed over her, and she sank into one of the chairs, pressing her hands against her belly where the baby rolled and kicked. She was exhausted beyond measure, but also felt a flicker of something she had not experienced in months: hope. When Thomas returned half an hour later, she had explored the small house and found that the bedroom contained a double bed with a faded quilt, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a trunk that she assumed held his clothes. She had unpacked her own few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses on pegs on the wall. "I heated more water," he said, gesturing to a pot on the stove. "If you want a bath, there is a tub in the bedroom. I can fill it for you." The thought of a bath sounded like heaven. "Are you sure?" "It seems like a lot of trouble." "It is no trouble." He made several trips, carrying hot water mixed with cold from the pump until the tub was full. "Take your time. I will be outside." Olivia lowered herself into the water with a sigh of pure relief. Her body ached from weeks of travel, first by train and then by stagecoach over rough roads. The warm water eased her sore muscles and swollen ankles. She washed her hair, scrubbing out the dust and grime, and by the time she climbed out and dried herself, she felt like a new person. She dressed in her nightgown and wrapper, braided her wet hair, and emerged to find Thomas sitting at the table, writing in a ledger by lamplight. He looked up when she entered and quickly stood. "You should rest," he said. "It has been a long day." "It has." She hesitated, wanting to say something more, to acknowledge what he had done for her. "Mr. Xavier, I do not know how to thank you for your kindness. You have saved my life and my child's life, and I will spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of that." He shook his head slowly. "You do not owe me gratitude. We made an agreement. I need a wife and you needed help. It is a practical arrangement, nothing more." But his eyes told a different story. They were not cold or calculating. They were warm and perhaps a little sad, and Olivia wondered what loneliness had driven this good man to advertise for a mail-order bride. "Still," she said softly, "thank you." He nodded and turned back to his ledger, clearly uncomfortable with sentiment. Olivia went into the bedroom and closed the door. The bed was more comfortable than it looked, and despite the strangeness of her situation, she fell asleep almost immediately. She woke in the night to a sharp pain across her belly. At first, she thought it was simply the baby moving, but then it came again, stronger this time. She lay still, breathing slowly, hoping it was false labor. She had experienced several episodes of false labor over the past few weeks, but the pains continued, growing stronger and closer together. After an hour, she knew with certainty that the baby was coming. She sat up carefully, lit the lamp beside the bed, and called out, "Mr. Xavier?" She heard immediate movement from the other room, and then he was at the door, fully dressed despite the late hour. "What is wrong?" "The baby is coming." "I am so sorry. I know this is terrible timing." To her surprise, he smiled slightly. "Babies come when they are ready, my mother always said. Do not apologize. What do you need?" "A midwife, if there is one. And towels, water, sheets." Another contraction hit, and she gripped the edge of the mattress, breathing through it. Thomas's expression grew determined. "The nearest midwife is in town. That is an hour's ride. I do not want to leave you alone that long." He paused, thinking. "Maria Santos lives on the neighboring ranch about 20 minutes away. She has delivered many babies. I will ride for her now. I hate to wake her in the middle of the night. She will not mind." He was already moving, grabbing his hat. "Will you be all right until I return?" "Yes." "Please hurry, but be safe." He was gone in moments, and Olivia heard the sound of hoofbeats fading into the night. She stood and walked around the room, having heard that movement could ease the pains. The contractions were still relatively far apart, and she hoped he would return in time. True to his word, Thomas was back within 40 minutes, accompanied by a sturdy Mexican woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. Maria Santos took one look at Olivia and began issuing orders to Thomas in accented English, sending him for clean sheets and hot water while she helped Olivia out of her nightgown and into a clean shift. "How long between the pains?" Maria asked, her hands gentle as she examined Olivia. "About 5 minutes now." "Good, good, you have time yet. First babies, they take their time." She smiled reassuringly. "I have delivered more babies than I can count, including my own 7. You are in good hands." Thomas returned with the items Maria had requested, his face slightly pale. Maria shooed him from the room. "Go boil more water, make coffee. This will be several hours yet." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and effort. Maria stayed by Olivia's side, offering encouragement and cold compresses, telling stories of her own children to distract from the contractions. Through the closed door, Olivia could hear Thomas moving around the house, occasionally checking if anything was needed. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky pink and gold when the baby finally arrived. A son, healthy and squalling, with a good set of lungs and a full head of dark hair. Maria cleaned him expertly and placed him in Olivia's arms, beaming with satisfaction. A beautiful boy, 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong and perfect. Olivia looked down at her son and felt her heart expand with a fierce, protective love she had never imagined possible. He was red-faced and angry at the moment, but to her, he was beautiful beyond words. Maria cleaned Olivia and changed the sheets, then went to the door. "Mr. Xavier, you have a son. Come meet him." Thomas entered hesitantly, his hat in his hands. He approached the bed slowly, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in Olivia's arms. When he reached them, he stood looking down at the baby with an expression of wonder. "He is perfect," Thomas said quietly. "Does he have a name?" Olivia had thought about names for months but had never decided. Now, looking at this man who had given her child legitimacy and a future without asking anything in return, she knew what the baby's name should be. "Thomas," she said softly. "I would like to name him Thomas after you, if that is acceptable." He looked surprised and deeply moved. "Are you certain? There are better names." "No," she said firmly. "There are no better names. You gave him your name legally. Now I want to give it to him completely. Thomas Xavier, Jr." He reached out tentatively and let the baby's tiny fist close around his finger. The baby stopped crying and opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, seeming to study the man looking down at him. Something passed between them in that moment, some wordless recognition, and when Thomas looked at Olivia again, there were tears in his eyes. "I will do right by him," he said hoarsely. "I swear to you I will raise him as my own, protect him, teach him to be a good man. No one will ever know he is not my blood." "Thank you," Olivia whispered, her own tears falling freely now. "Thank you for everything." Maria smiled at them both, clearly pleased. "I will make you breakfast and then you must rest. Both of you need rest." She left them alone, closing the door softly behind her. Thomas pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, still holding the baby's hand. "He is very small." "All babies are small." Olivia was exhausted but too full of emotion to sleep. "You have not slept at all, have you? I was worried. About you, about the baby." He glanced at her, then away as if embarrassed by the admission. "I am glad you are both well." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun rose higher, filling the room with golden light. The baby slept in Olivia's arms, occasionally making small snuffling sounds. Thomas eventually dozed off in his chair, his head tipped back and his hand still extended toward the bed where the baby could have reached it if he had been awake. Looking at them both, her accidental husband and her newborn son, Olivia felt something shift inside her. She had come west desperate and afraid, expecting nothing but a practical arrangement with a stranger. What she had found was something else entirely. A man of unexpected honor, a home, and the beginning of something that might, in time, become a real family. Over the following weeks, a routine established itself. Thomas worked the ranch from dawn until dusk, tending cattle and horses, mending fences, doing the endless tasks that kept a small ranch running. Olivia recovered from the birth and gradually took over the domestic duties, cooking meals, tending the garden, caring for the chickens, and of course, looking after little Thomas, whom they quickly began calling Tommy to avoid confusion. They were polite with each other, careful and respectful. Thomas never pressed her for anything beyond what she offered, never demanded his rights as a husband. He slept on a bedroll in the main room and treated her with unfailing courtesy. Olivia found herself grateful for his patience, but also, to her surprise, disappointed. She had expected a marriage of convenience, a business arrangement. What she had not expected was to find herself growing genuinely fond of her accidental husband. He was kind without being soft, hardworking without complaint, and unexpectedly gentle with Tommy. Every evening when he came in from the range, he would wash up at the pump and then ask to hold the baby. He would sit in his chair by the fire, the infant cradled carefully in his work-roughened hands, and talk to him in a low voice about the day's events, about the horses, about the weather. Tommy would stare up at him with intense concentration, and Olivia would watch them both with an ache in her chest that she did not quite understand. 6 weeks after Tommy's birth, Olivia rode into town with Thomas to purchase supplies. It was her first trip since arriving, and she was curious to see Camp Verde in a calmer state of mind. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with shops and businesses. People stared as they passed, which made Olivia uncomfortable, but Thomas seemed unbothered. At the general store, they encountered Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, and several other women. Mrs. Henderson looked at Tommy, sleeping in Olivia's arms, and smiled with what seemed like genuine warmth. "What a beautiful baby, Mrs. Xavier. He looks just like his father, does he not?" There was a slight emphasis on the last words, and Olivia realized the woman was offering her a kindness, publicly acknowledging Tommy as Thomas's son. "Everyone says so," Olivia agreed, managing a smile. After Mrs. Henderson moved away, Thomas leaned close and murmured, "See, I told you the gossip would die down once we were married and the baby was born. Were people very unkind while I was recovering?" Olivia asked, concerned. "Nothing I could not handle. A few comments here and there, mostly from people with nothing better to do than judge others. But the decent folks, the ones who matter, they have accepted you." He paused. "They like you, actually. Mrs. Henderson said you seemed like a fine woman who had fallen on hard times. She admires that you traveled so far to make a better life." Olivia felt tears sting her eyes. She had expected condemnation, not understanding. "That is very kind of her. She is a good woman. So is Maria Santos. You have friends here if you want them." The idea of having friends, of being part of a community, was unexpectedly appealing. In Boston, she had been friendless and alone after her parents died. Here, in this rough frontier town, people seemed willing to give her a second chance. As summer turned to fall, the days grew cooler and the cottonwood leaves turned gold. Olivia threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains for the windows, planting late vegetables in the garden, preserving food for winter. Maria Santos visited regularly, bringing her daughters and teaching Olivia the skills she would need to survive in this harsh land. How to make soap, how to render lard, how to doctor sick animals. Thomas hired a young man named Jake to help with the cattle work, which meant he could spend more time near the house. Olivia found herself looking forward to his return each evening, to their quiet dinners together, and the hour they spent afterward when he played with Tommy while she cleaned up the kitchen. One evening in October, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Thomas spoke suddenly into the comfortable silence. "You have made this house feel different, better. I had not realized how lonely it was until you came." Olivia looked up from her mending, surprised. "I am glad to be useful." "It is more than that." He struggled for words, staring into the flames. "I had given up on certain things, on having a family, on coming home to someone. The years pass quickly out here, and before you know it, you are 40 and alone with nothing but cattle and memories." He glanced at her. "You and Tommy, you have given me something I did not know I was missing." Her heart beat faster. "You have given us far more. You have given us everything." "I want you to know," he continued, his voice low and serious, "that I do not expect anything from you. This arrangement we have, it can stay as it is for as long as you want. But if you ever, if you should ever want more." He trailed off, clearly embarrassed. Olivia set down her mending. "Thomas, I need to tell you something. When I came here, I was running away. I was desperate and afraid, and I thought my life was over. You changed all of that. You gave me hope again. But more than that, you have shown me what a good man looks like, what honor and kindness look like." She took a deep breath. "I did not expect to have feelings for you. I thought this would be a practical arrangement, nothing more. But I find myself caring for you, thinking about you during the day, looking forward to seeing you in the evening. If you want more from this marriage, I want that too." He stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel obligated." "I am certain." She stood and crossed to his chair, her heart pounding. "I want to be a real wife to you, Thomas, if you will have me." He rose quickly, taking her hands in his. "If I will have you." "Olivia, I have been half in love with you since the day you stepped off that stage, tired and brave and so beautiful it hurt to look at you. I just did not think you could ever feel the same." "How could I not?" she asked softly. "You are the best man I have ever known." He kissed her then, gently at first and then with more passion, his arms coming around her carefully as if she were something precious and breakable. She kissed him back, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, feeling the strength in him and the tenderness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right, court you properly, even though we are already married." She laughed, slightly breathless. "We are doing everything backward. Then let us start doing it forward." He smiled, and she realized it was the first time she had seen him truly smile, not just a quick quirk of his lips, but a real, genuine smile that lit up his whole face. "Tomorrow, I am taking you on a proper date. Maria can watch Tommy for a few hours. I want to show you the high pasture. The aspens will be turning gold up there, and there is a view that I have been wanting to share with you." "I would like that," Olivia said. "I would like that very much." That night, Thomas moved his things into the bedroom, and they lay together in the dark, talking quietly about their pasts and their hopes for the future. He told her about his childhood in Texas, his parents' deaths, his journey to Arizona. She told him about Boston, her parents, her sister's rejection. They talked until the fire burned down to embers, and exhaustion finally claimed them both. The next afternoon, true to his word, Thomas saddled 2 horses and helped Olivia mount. Maria arrived to care for Tommy, shooing them off with a knowing smile. They rode up into the hills, following trails that wound between red rocks and through stands of pine trees. The air was crisp and clean, scented with juniper and sage. The high pasture was everything Thomas had promised. Golden aspens shimmered in the breeze, and the view stretched for miles, showing the valley below and the distant mountains beyond. Thomas spread a blanket under the trees and unpacked a simple picnic: bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of cool water from the creek. They sat together, shoulders touching, eating and talking. Thomas pointed out landmarks, telling her stories about the land and the cattle, sharing his dreams of expanding the ranch, maybe buying more grazing land to the north. Olivia found herself caught up in his vision, adding her own ideas, talking about improving the garden, maybe getting some pigs to raise. "You see a future here," Thomas said, and it was not quite a question. "I do. A good future with you." She turned to face him fully. "I want you to know something, Thomas. What happened in Boston with Tommy's father, it left me feeling broken and used. I thought I would never trust a man again, never want to be close to anyone. But you have changed that. You have shown me that not all men are cruel, that some keep their promises and honor their commitments. You have healed something in me that I thought was destroyed forever." He cupped her face gently. "You were never broken, Olivia. You were hurt, which is different. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met." He kissed her softly. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me." They made love for the first time there under the aspens, with the golden leaves whispering overhead and the vast Arizona sky stretched above them. It was tender and sweet, and nothing like Olivia's previous experience. Thomas was patient and gentle, making sure of her comfort, her pleasure. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, the blanket pulled over them against the cooling air. "I love you," Olivia whispered, the words coming easily, naturally. "I love you too," Thomas replied, tightening his arms around her. "I think I have loved you from the moment you told me you would not be defeated by circumstance. I never said that. You did not have to. I could see it in the way you held yourself, the way you looked the world in the eye despite everything." He kissed her forehead. "My brave Olivia." They rode home as the sun was setting, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. Maria took one look at their faces and smiled broadly, gathering her things. "About time," she said in Spanish, winking at Olivia. "I will see you next week for dinner, yes?" "Yes, and thank you for watching Tommy," Olivia said warmly. That night set the pattern for their life together. They were not just husband and wife now, but lovers and partners. Thomas still worked long days on the ranch, but he came home for lunch when he could, stealing kisses in the kitchen while Olivia cooked. In the evenings, they would sit together after Tommy was asleep, talking about their days, making plans, simply enjoying each other's company. Winter came to Camp Verde, bringing cold nights and occasional snow. The ranch work slowed somewhat, which meant Thomas could spend more time at home. He used the long evenings to teach Olivia to play chess on a battered board his father had given him. She proved to be a quick learner, and soon was beating him regularly, much to his amused chagrin. Tommy grew rapidly, becoming a chubby, happy baby who laughed easily and seemed to adore his father. Thomas spent hours playing with him, building him toys from scraps of wood, singing him half-remembered lullabies. Watching them together always made Olivia's heart swell with love. In January, Olivia realized she was pregnant again. She told Thomas one evening after dinner, suddenly nervous. They had never discussed having more children, and she worried he might feel burdened. Instead, his face lit up with pure joy. "Truly, we are having a baby. Yes, in late summer, I think." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing. "This is wonderful news. Tommy will have a brother or sister." "You are happy then?" "Happy, Olivia, I am thrilled. I always wanted a house full of children." He set her down gently, his hands on her waist. "Are you happy?" "Yes," she said, and realized it was true. A year ago, she had been terrified of her pregnancy, alone and desperate. Now, carrying Thomas's child, she felt nothing but joy. "Yes, I am very happy." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia felt strong and healthy, and the morning sickness was much milder than it had been with Tommy. Spring came, bringing wildflowers to the high meadows and new calves to the herd. Thomas hired another hand, a reliable older man named Sam, which took some of the burden off him and Jake. One warm evening in April, they received unexpected visitors. A fancy buggy pulled up to the house, and a well-dressed couple in their 50s climbed out. The man was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and an air of authority. The woman was elegant, with kind eyes that reminded Olivia sharply of Thomas. Thomas came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, and stopped dead when he saw them. "Aunt Catherine, Uncle Robert, what are you doing here?" The woman, Catherine, hurried forward and embraced him. "We heard you got married. Why did you not write to us?" "We only found out because Robert has business connections in Prescott, and someone mentioned it to him." Robert shook Thomas's hand warmly. "Congratulations, my boy. We wanted to meet your bride." Thomas looked slightly embarrassed but pleased. He gestured toward Olivia, who stood on the porch holding Tommy. "This is my wife, Olivia, and my son, Thomas Jr." Catherine's eyes went straight to the baby, then to Olivia's obvious pregnancy, and understanding dawned in her expression. But there was no judgment there, only warmth. "How wonderful! Olivia, it is such a pleasure to meet you, and this little one, may I hold him?" Olivia handed Tommy over, watching carefully. Catherine cooed over the baby with genuine delight, while Robert clapped Thomas on the shoulder. "You have done well for yourself, Thomas. A wife, a son, another baby on the way. Your parents would be so proud." They invited the couple inside, and Olivia hurried to make coffee and set out what food she had. Catherine insisted on helping, and in the kitchen, she spoke quietly to Olivia. "My dear, I do not know your circumstances, and I do not need to. What I see is a woman who clearly loves my nephew and a baby who is healthy and happy. That is all that matters to me." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know. Thomas was alone for too long. I worried about him out here away from family, but I can see you have made him happy. That is all his aunt could wish for him." She squeezed Olivia's hand. "I hope we can be friends and that you will consider me family." "I would like that very much," Olivia said sincerely. Catherine and Robert stayed for dinner and overnight, regaling them with news of family back east. It turned out Robert was Thomas's uncle on his mother's side, a successful businessman with no children of his own. He seemed genuinely delighted by Tommy and insisted on setting up a bank account for the boy's future education. "Every child should have opportunities," he said firmly, "and my nephew's children are my family too." After they left the next day, pressing invitations for future visits, Olivia turned to Thomas with shining eyes. "They were wonderful. I was so nervous about meeting your family. They loved you, as I knew they would." He pulled her close, his hand resting on the swell of her belly. "Everything is falling into place, is it not? We have a home, a family, people who care about us. Sometimes I have to remind myself this is real." "It is real," Olivia assured him. "This is our life, Thomas, our beautiful, unexpected life." Summer brought scorching heat and the arrival of their second child. This time, the labor was shorter and Maria arrived in plenty of time. They had a daughter, red-faced and indignant with a surprising amount of blonde hair. "She looks like you," Thomas said in wonder, holding his daughter for the first time. "She has your eyes," Olivia replied. "Or she will, I think." They named her Sarah after Thomas's mother. Tommy, now a year old and walking, was fascinated by his new sister, constantly wanting to touch her gently and bring her his toys. Thomas built a cradle for Sarah and a small bed for Tommy, working in the evenings by lamplight. The ranch continued to prosper. Thomas's careful management and hard work paid off, and they were able to buy additional land and increase the herd. They hired another hand, a young Mexican man named Carlos, who proved to be excellent with horses. Jake and Sam remained reliable workers who had become almost like family. On their second wedding anniversary, Thomas surprised Olivia with a gift, a beautiful mare, gentle and well-trained. "So you can ride with me again," he explained. "Maria said she would watch the children any time you want to get away for a few hours." They rode together often that fall, sometimes to the high pasture where they had first made love, sometimes just exploring the boundaries of their expanding ranch. These hours alone together were precious, a chance to talk without interruption, to simply be a couple rather than parents and ranch owners. One evening, as they watched the sunset from a rocky outcrop, Thomas spoke thoughtfully. "Do you ever regret it, coming west, marrying a stranger?" Olivia turned to him, surprised. "Never, not for one moment. Do you regret taking in a pregnant woman with so much baggage? You were never baggage. You were a gift, though I did not fully understand that at first." He took her hand. "That day you stepped off the stage, I saw a woman in trouble and thought I was doing the honorable thing. I did not realize I was meeting the person who would make my life complete." "We saved each other," Olivia said softly. "I think we were both lost in different ways and we found each other exactly when we needed to." "Do you ever think about Tommy's biological father?" Thomas asked carefully. It was a subject they rarely discussed. Olivia considered the question. "Sometimes, but not the way you might think. I wonder if he ever regrets his choices, if he ever thinks about the son he rejected. But mostly, I feel grateful to him." Thomas looked surprised. "Grateful? If he had not been the man he was, I would not have come west. I would not have met you. Tommy would not have you as his father." She squeezed his hand. "His cruelty led me to your kindness. His rejection brought me to your acceptance. I would not change anything because it brought me here to this life to you." Thomas pulled her close. "Tommy is my son in every way that matters. I forget sometimes that I did not father him." "You did father him," Olivia said firmly. "Being a father has nothing to do with blood. It has to do with showing up every day with love and patience and sacrifice. You are the only father Tommy will ever know, and he is lucky to have you." They rode home in the twilight, the lights of their house visible in the valley below. Olivia thought about how that simple adobe structure had become a true home, filled with love and laughter. Inside, Maria would be feeding the children dinner, Sarah probably covered in mashed vegetables and Tommy chattering about his day. Winter passed, then spring came again. Tommy grew into a bright, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, mimicking his walk and his gestures. Sarah developed into a sweet, happy baby who rarely cried and smiled at everyone. In the summer of 1885, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. She and Thomas were both delighted, though she groaned about spending another summer heavily pregnant in the Arizona heat. This pregnancy was different from the previous two, harder on her body, and she had to rest more than she liked. Thomas became fiercely protective, hiring a woman from town to help with the housework, and insisting that Olivia do nothing more strenuous than light cooking. He came home for lunch every day to check on her, bringing wildflowers or interesting rocks he found on the range to make her smile. "You are going to spoil me," she protested one afternoon when he arrived with a new rocking chair he had bought in town. "That is my intention," he replied, setting it on the porch where she could sit in the shade. "You are carrying my child. You deserve to be spoiled." The baby arrived in early November, another boy, bigger than the other two had been. They named him James, and from the beginning he had a loud voice and strong opinions about everything. Tommy was now 3 and took his role as big brother very seriously, while Sarah, at 15 months, was more interested in pulling the baby's hair than helping with him. 3 children, Thomas marveled one evening looking at their sleeping offspring. We have 3 children. Are you overwhelmed? Olivia asked, concerned. 3 children meant more expenses, more work, more responsibility. No, I am blessed. He put his arm around her. My parents wanted a big family, but they only had me before my father died. I always wished for brothers and sisters. Now I get to give that to my children. Life settled into a new rhythm with 3 children. The house that had seemed spacious now felt full, loud with children's voices and laughter. Thomas expanded the house that winter, adding another bedroom and enlarging the main room. He also built a proper schoolroom, determined that his children would have a good education. Olivia taught Tommy his letters and numbers, using readers that Catherine and Robert sent from back east. The boy was bright and eager to learn, asking endless questions about everything. Sarah proved to be musically inclined, singing before she could talk properly, and James was simply determined, approaching every challenge with stubborn persistence. The years passed in a blur of activity. The ranch continued to grow, becoming one of the most successful in the territory. Thomas's reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock spread, and buyers came from as far as California to purchase his cattle and horses. He took on a partner, an older rancher named Henry who owned adjacent land, and together they built an even more prosperous operation. Olivia became known in Camp Verde as a skilled healer, learning from Maria Santos and from books Catherine sent. Women came to her for help with difficult pregnancies, sick children, various ailments. She never charged for her services, but grateful families often left eggs, vegetables, or meat in thanks. Tommy grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and animals equally. At 8, he could ride as well as any of the ranch hands and could also recite poetry and do complex mathematics. Sarah was 7, blonde and beautiful, with a voice that made people stop and listen when she sang in church. James was 5, tough and stubborn, always getting into mischief but impossible to stay angry with. One evening in 1890, as Thomas and Olivia sat on their porch watching the sunset, he said quietly, "Tommy asked me today about his name." Olivia's heart skipped. What did he ask? He wanted to know if he was named after me because I was his father. I told him yes. Thomas paused. He is 8 years old, Olivia, old enough to understand things. Do we tell him the truth? Olivia had dreaded this conversation for years. What do you think we should do? I think we should tell him, but I want him to know that it changes nothing. I am his father in every way that matters, and I love him no differently than I love Sarah and James. They called Tommy to them that evening after the younger children were in bed. The boy came willingly, settling on the porch steps between them. He looked so much like Thomas now, having adopted his mannerisms and expressions, that strangers never questioned their relationship. Thomas began carefully. "Tommy, your mother and I need to talk to you about something important, something about how our family began." Tommy looked between them, his face serious. "All right." Olivia took a deep breath. "When I came to Arizona to marry your father, I was already pregnant with you. Your biological father was a man in Boston who did not want to be a father. He abandoned us." Tommy processed this information, his face thoughtful. "So Pa is not my real father. I am your real father," Thomas said firmly, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I have been your father since the day you were born. The fact that I did not contribute to your creation does not change that." "But you married Ma knowing she was pregnant with someone else's baby." Tommy looked confused. "Why would you do that?" "Because your mother needed help, and because it was the right thing to do. But also, Tommy, because from the moment I met her, I loved her. And from the moment you were born, I loved you." Thomas knelt in front of the boy so they were eye level. "You are my son, my first son. I chose you just as much as you would have been mine if I had fathered you. Do you understand?" Tommy's eyes filled with tears. "What if I want to know about the other man, the one who is biologically my father?" "Then we will tell you what we know," Olivia said gently. "You have a right to that information. But Tommy, he did not want to be your father. Your real father is the man who has raised you, who has taught you to ride and read, who has sat up with you when you were sick and cheered for you when you succeeded. Biology matters far less than love." Tommy thought about this for a long moment. Then he turned to Thomas and hugged him fiercely. "You are my pa. I do not want any other father. I do not care about biology." Thomas held him tightly, his eyes squeezed shut against tears. "I love you, son, so very much." "I love you too, Pa." Tommy pulled back and wiped his eyes. "Can I ask one thing?" "Anything," Thomas promised. "Does this mean Sarah and James are only my half-siblings?" "Technically, yes," Olivia admitted. Tommy considered this, then shook his head. "That is stupid. They are my whole brother and sister. I do not do anything by halves." Both parents laughed, though there were tears in their eyes too. Thomas ruffled Tommy's hair. "That is my boy. Now off to bed, and Tommy, thank you for understanding." After he left, Olivia collapsed against Thomas, shaking with relief. "That went better than I feared. He is a good boy. We have raised him well." Thomas held her close. "All three of them are good children. We are very lucky." "We have built a good life," Olivia agreed. "Sometimes I think back to that day I stepped off the stage, terrified and alone, and I can hardly believe how much has changed. Do you remember what I said that day, when I first saw you? You said the child would have your name. I meant it as a practical thing, a legal protection. I did not realize I was making a promise to love that child as my own, but that is what happened. Tommy is as much my son as if I had fathered him myself." He kissed her softly. "You gave me a family, Olivia. You gave me everything." The children grew and thrived. Tommy proved to have a gift for working with horses, gentle and patient in a way that even the most difficult animals responded to. By the time he was 12, people were bringing their horses to him for training. Sarah discovered she loved teaching and spent hours helping the younger children in the area learn their letters. James remained the wild one, always seeking adventure, but his courage and determination served him well. In 1893, Arizona Territory continued to grow and change. Railroads had come to the region, bringing more settlers and new opportunities. Camp Verde grew into a proper town with a school, a doctor, and even a small theater. Thomas and Olivia's ranch was now one of the largest in the area, employing a dozen hands and running several thousand head of cattle. But success had not changed them fundamentally. They still worked hard, still valued family above all else. Sunday dinners had become a tradition, with Maria Santos and her family joining them, along with Jake and Sam, who were considered family by now. The long table Thomas had built could seat 20, and it was often full of laughter and conversation. One Sunday after dinner, as the men sat on the porch and the women cleaned up inside, Maria spoke quietly to Olivia. "You have built something special here. Not just a ranch, but a real family, a community." "We have been blessed," Olivia agreed, washing dishes while Sarah dried. "When I think about how lost I was when I came here, how frightened." "God sends us where we need to be," Maria said. "Thomas needed you as much as you needed him. And look what you have created together." That night, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Thomas and Olivia sat on their porch as they had so many nights before. Tommy was 13 now, Sarah 12, and James 10. The house was quiet for once, a rare moment of peace. "I have been thinking," Thomas said slowly, "about the future, about what happens to the ranch when we are gone." "That is morbid," Olivia protested. "Practical," he corrected. "We have built something good here, and I want to make sure it is protected. I want to divide the ranch equally between the 3 children. Tommy, as the oldest, will have decision-making authority, but they will all have equal shares." "That is fair. Tommy will be a good steward of the land. He will. He loves this place as much as I do." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I think about that day you arrived. If I had turned you away, as many men would have, where would you be now? Where would Tommy be?" "I try not to think about that," Olivia admitted. "It frightens me how close I came to complete ruin." "But you did not. You survived. You were brave enough to get on that stage, to travel across the country, to face an uncertain future head-on." He took her hand. "I am proud of you, Olivia. I always have been. Your strength, your courage, your capacity for love. You amaze me every day." She leaned against his shoulder. "We have been good for each other, you and I. We took a desperate situation and made it into something beautiful." "We did indeed." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Inside, their children slept safely, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. The ranch spread around them, land they had worked and nurtured into prosperity. It was a good life, built on a foundation of unexpected kindness and growing love. More years passed. Tommy grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's quick mind. At 18, he was already running much of the ranch operation, making decisions that proved sound and thoughtful. Young women in town certainly noticed him, but he seemed in no hurry to settle down, focused on learning everything he could about ranching and horse training. Sarah, at 17, was teaching at the school in town, her beautiful voice leading the choir at church every Sunday. She had several suitors, but she insisted she would not marry until she found a man who respected her mind as much as her pretty face. Olivia could not have been prouder. James, 15, remained the adventurous one. He talked constantly about seeing California, maybe even going to college back east. Thomas encouraged these dreams, setting aside money for his education. All 3 children knew they were loved unconditionally, that their parents would support whatever paths they chose. In 1898, on a warm spring evening, the family gathered for a special occasion. Tommy had asked to bring someone to dinner, a young woman named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch. It was the first time he had shown serious interest in anyone, and the family was curious. Elizabeth proved to be a lovely young woman, intelligent and kind, with a practical nature that suggested she would adapt well to ranch life. She and Tommy looked at each other with an affection that reminded Thomas forcibly of his early days with Olivia. After dinner, Tommy asked to speak with his parents privately. They went out to the porch and Tommy stood before them, nervous but determined. "I want to ask Elizabeth to marry me, but first I wanted to ask your permission and your blessing." He looked between them. "You two have shown me what a good marriage looks like. You have taught me that love is not just feeling but action, that it is showing up every day and choosing each other again and again. That is what I want with Elizabeth." Olivia felt tears gathering. Her baby, her firstborn, was a man now, ready to start his own family. "You have our blessing, Tommy. Elizabeth is wonderful." "Just remember," Thomas said, his voice slightly rough with emotion, "marriage is work. Good work, worthwhile work, but work nonetheless. There will be hard days. What matters is that you face them together." "I know, Pa. You and Ma have shown me that." Tommy hesitated. "There is one more thing. When I have children of my own, I want to tell them the story of how our family began." How Ma came west pregnant and alone, and how you chose to be my father even though you did not have to be. I want my children to know that family is not just blood, but love and choice." Thomas embraced his son, unable to speak for a moment. When he found his voice, it was hoarse. "That would honor me greatly. You are a good man, Tommy. Your mother and I are so proud of you." Tommy and Elizabeth married that summer in a beautiful ceremony at the church in Camp Verde. Half the town attended, testament to the respect and affection the Xavier family had earned over the years. Sarah sang, her voice pure and clear, and James stood up as his brother's best man. Catherine and Robert came from back east, delighting in the family they had watched grow and thrive. At the reception, Thomas pulled Olivia onto the makeshift dance floor. They had not danced since their wedding day 16 years earlier, but they moved together easily, comfortable in each other's arms. "Our son is married," Olivia marveled. "How did he grow up so fast? The same way they all do, much too quickly." Thomas smiled at her. "But we have raised him well. He will be happy with Elizabeth. Do you remember our wedding? How awkward and strange it was. I remember being terrified I would do something wrong, say something that would frighten you away." He pulled her closer. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and wondering what I had done to deserve such luck." "Luck," Olivia laughed. "Thomas, you took in a pregnant stranger out of pure kindness. You earned every good thing that followed." "We earned it together," he corrected. "This life, this family, we built it together." They danced as the sun set, surrounded by their children and friends, celebrating the continuation of the family they had created from desperate circumstances and unexpected grace. Sarah married 2 years later, choosing a young lawyer from Prescott who cherished her mind and spirit. They settled in town, where she continued teaching, and he built a successful practice. James went off to college in California, studying engineering and writing long letters home about his adventures. He returned every summer to help with the ranch, still drawn to the land despite his explorations elsewhere. Tommy and Elizabeth had their first child in 1900, a son they named Thomas Xavier III. Olivia held her first grandchild with tears streaming down her face, thinking of the circle of life, of how far they had all come. Thomas stood beside her, his arm around her waist, looking down at his grandson with wonder. "We are grandparents," he said, awe in his voice. "How is that possible? I still feel like a young man." "We are getting older," Olivia said, though she hardly believed it herself. "Our children are having children of their own." But getting older had its own rewards. They had more time now, with the ranch largely in Tommy's capable hands. They took trips to visit Sarah in Prescott, traveled to California to see James. They spent long, lazy mornings on their porch, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over land they loved. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1902, Thomas surprised Olivia with a trip to San Francisco. They stayed in a fine hotel, saw plays and museums, ate in fancy restaurants. But after a week, they both admitted they missed home, missed the quiet of the ranch and the big sky overhead. On the train back to Arizona, Thomas held her hand and said quietly, 20 years. 20 years since you stepped off that stage and changed my life forever." "It changed both our lives," Olivia corrected. "I was so frightened that day. I truly thought you would send me away, that I would end up destitute and alone. I could never have sent you away. From the moment I saw you, something in my heart recognized you. My future, standing there in a dusty street, pregnant and brave and so beautiful it hurt." He kissed her hand. "I would do it all again, exactly the same way. Even the parts where I was impossible. When Tommy was colicky and I was so tired I cried for 3 days straight. When Sarah went through that phase where she would only eat bread. When James broke his arm falling out of the barn loft, and I blamed you for building it too high, Thomas laughed. Even those parts, especially those parts, they are what made us a real family. Back home, they settled into a comfortable routine. More grandchildren arrived. Sarah had twin girls, and James married a vivacious young woman from San Francisco and had a daughter. The ranch house, now expanded several times, filled with grandchildren on holidays, echoing with laughter and noise. In 1910, Thomas and Olivia celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and a crowd of friends who had become family over the years. Maria Santos, now in her 70s, raised a glass in toast. To the couple who proved that love can grow from the most unlikely beginnings, may you have many more years together. That night, alone in their bedroom, Thomas held Olivia close. 30 years. Sometimes it feels like yesterday you arrived. Other times I cannot remember what life was like before you. We have been blessed, Olivia said softly. 3 beautiful children, 5 grandchildren, a successful ranch, good health, good friends. What more could we possibly ask for? Nothing. We have everything that matters. He kissed her gently. I love you, Olivia Xavier. I have loved you for 30 years, and I will love you for 30 more if God grants us that time. I love you too. You saved my life, Thomas. You saved Tommy's life. And then you gave us this beautiful family, this incredible life. I thank God for you every single day. They held each other in the darkness, grateful for the years behind them and the years yet to come. Outside, the Arizona night was clear and cool, stars brilliant overhead. The land they had worked and loved spread around them, and in houses nearby, their children slept safely, carrying forward the legacy of love and determination that Thomas and Olivia had built. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, and the Xavier family celebrated along with the rest of the territory. Tommy expanded the ranch operation, incorporating modern techniques while respecting traditional methods. Sarah became the principal of her school, respected and beloved by students and parents alike. James became a successful engineer in San Francisco, but returned home every Christmas without fail, his children growing up with stories of the Arizona ranch. In 1915, as Thomas and Olivia approached their 33rd anniversary, they took stock of their lives. Thomas was now 65, still strong but feeling his age after decades of hard work. Olivia was 52, her hair more gray than brown now, but her eyes still bright and her spirit undimmed. They sat on their porch one evening, the same porch where they had spent thousands of evenings over the years. The same chairs, worn comfortable with use. The same view, though the ranch had grown and changed around them. You ever regret not having more children? Thomas asked suddenly. We stopped after James, but we were still young enough. Olivia considered the question. No, 3 was perfect for us. We gave each of them the attention and love they needed, and now we have grandchildren to spoil. 7 grandchildren, Thomas said with satisfaction. And Tommy said Elizabeth is expecting again. 8 grandchildren. We are truly blessed. She took his hand. Thomas, I want you to know something. These 33 years with you have been the happiest of my life. You took a broken, frightened young woman and loved her into wholeness. You raised my son as your own and never once made him feel less than. You built this life for us with your own hands and your good heart. I could not have asked for a better husband or a better father for my children. Thomas felt his throat tighten with emotion. Even after all these years, Olivia could still move him to tears with her words. You made me whole too. I did not even know I was incomplete until you arrived. I thought I was content with my solitary life, my work, my cattle. but you showed me what I was missing: love, partnership, family. You gave me everything, Olivia." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink. Inside, they could hear their granddaughter practicing piano, the notes slightly off-key but earnest. Tomorrow, the house would fill with family for Sunday dinner. The day after, they would ride out to check the north pasture, as they had done every week for decades. It was a good life, built on a foundation of unexpected kindness, and choosing to love when it would have been easier not to. From a desperate beginning had grown something strong and beautiful, a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. Years later, when Thomas and Olivia were both gone and their children and grandchildren gathered to remember them, Tommy stood up to speak. He was in his 60s now, weathered and strong like his father had been. His own children and grandchildren sat listening as he told the story of how his family began. "My mother arrived in Camp Verde in 1882, 9 months pregnant and terrified. My father could have turned her away. Most men would have. But he looked at her and said 5 words that changed all our lives. That child will have my name. He married her that same day, and when I was born the next morning, he became my father in every way that mattered. He never once treated me differently than my siblings. He loved me completely, unconditionally, and that love shaped the man I became." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "My parents taught me that family is not just about blood. It is about showing up. It is about choosing love every single day. It is about commitment and sacrifice, and staying when it would be easier to leave. They showed me what a good marriage looks like, what good parenting looks like. Everything I am, everything we are as a family, comes from the choice my father made on that dusty street 33 years ago to see a woman in need and help her." As he sat down, his daughter stood up. She was named Olivia, after the grandmother she resembled. "I think about my grandparents' story often. How Grandpa saw past circumstances to the person Grandma was. How Grandma had the courage to accept help, to trust again after being hurt. How they built something beautiful out of something broken. That is the legacy they left us. Not just this ranch, not just material things, but the knowledge that love and kindness can transform lives. That family is created through choice and commitment. That it is never too late to start over, to build something good." The family gathered that day to honor Thomas and Olivia Xavier, whose love story began with an act of unexpected grace and grew into a legacy that shaped generations. The ranch they built together continues to thrive, passed down through children and grandchildren who carry forward the values of hard work, kindness, and unconditional love. It was told and retold, changing slightly with each telling but always maintaining its essential truth. That real love is found not in perfect circumstances, but in imperfect people choosing to care for each other. Years after both were gone, people still spoke of Thomas and Olivia Xavier with respect and affection. They remembered the tall, quiet cowboy who worked from dawn to dusk and loved his family fiercely. They remembered the strong, graceful woman who arrived in disgrace and became one of the most respected members of their community. They remembered 3 children raised with love and values who became fine adults. They remembered a marriage that started as an arrangement and became a love story. The ranch house still stands, maintained now by great-grandchildren who preserve it as a family home and gathering place. The porch where Thomas and Olivia spent thousands of evenings is still there, the wood worn smooth by generations of feet. The bedroom where 3 children were born remains much as it was. The barn where Thomas taught his children to ride and work with animals has been restored and updated, but retains its original structure, On the living room wall hangs a photograph from their 30th anniversary. Thomas stands tall in his best suit, one arm around Olivia, who wears a simple dress and her mother's pearls. They are not young anymore in this photo. Thomas's hair is gray, and Olivia's face shows the lines of a life well lived, but their eyes shine with unmistakable love and contentment. Surrounded by their children and grandchildren, they look like what they are: two people who built something lasting from a foundation of kindness and unexpected grace. The story ends not with their deaths, but with their legacy continuing through children and grandchildren who carry forward their values. Tommy's descendants still run the ranch, now one of the largest in Arizona. Sarah's great-granddaughter is a teacher, carrying on the family tradition of education. James's grandson is an engineer like his great-grandfather, but he spends his summers in Camp Verde, maintaining the connection to the family land. On summer evenings, when the family gathers for reunions, someone always suggests sitting on the porch as the sun sets, as Thomas and Olivia did for so many years. They watch the sky turn orange and pink, the same colors their ancestors saw. They tell stories of Thomas and Olivia, keeping their memory alive for new generations. They talk about the choice Thomas made on that dusty street in 1882, and how that single act of kindness rippled forward through time, creating a family that now numbers in the dozens. "That child will have my name," Thomas had said. He could not have known that those 5 words would become the foundation of a family legacy spanning generations. He could not have foreseen the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who would carry his name and values forward. He simply saw a woman in need and chose to help her. That choice, made in a moment but honored for a lifetime, became the story that defined them. Not a story of perfect people or perfect circumstances, but of imperfect people choosing to love each other, to build something together, to create family out of circumstance and commitment. It was a story of the Old West, of hard work and harsh conditions and people making the best of difficult situations. But more than that, it was a love story, proof that sometimes the greatest love stories start in the most unlikely ways. Thomas and Olivia Xavier lived long, full lives surrounded by love and family. They faced challenges and hardships as everyone does, but they faced them together. They built not just a successful ranch but a real home, a place where children grew up secure and loved, where friends became family, where love was the foundation of everything. Their story, beginning with a pregnant woman stepping off a stagecoach and a cowboy making an impossible promise, became a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love. It proved that family is created not just by blood, but by choice, by showing up, by loving unconditionally even when it is hard. And so their legacy continues, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that one moment of grace can change everything. The child who arrived unnamed and fatherless became the patriarch of a dynasty. The woman who arrived in disgrace became the beloved matriarch. The cowboy who made an impulsive promise became the example of manhood and fatherhood for generations to come. That is the story of Thomas and Olivia Xavier, mail-order bride and lonely cowboy, who met in August of 1882 and built a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, echoing through the decades in the lives of the family they created together.